So the story begins in Kravavi prison, a prison where death follows inmates at every step, a place where law is ruled not by justice but by power, and weak prisoners have to fight the strongest inmates just to survive. And if any prisoner tries to escape, they are immediately put to death. In this prison, we are introduced to a prisoner named Kyle, who was sentenced to life imprisonment for murder and sent here forever. Actually, Kyle used to work as a manager at a steel factory in Russia and lived a happy married life with his wife, Gray. But one night changes both their lives completely. As Kyle is returning home from work, he receives a call from Gray asking him to come home quickly, because at that very moment, a man breaks into their house and attacks her. By coincidence, Kyle hears everything over the phone, so he rushes home. But by the time he arrives, it is too late. Gray is dead. Kyle is shattered by her death when suddenly the killer attacks him from behind and escapes. Kyle immediately chases him and catches him on a bus. Soon the police arrest both of them and present them in court. There, we learn that the killer's name is Sergio, who belongs to a powerful Russian gang. The hearing begins, but the judge rules in Sergio's favor and releases him because Sergio had already bribed the judges. Kyle never expected such injustice. Sergio then comes close to Kyle and mocks him about his freedom right in front of the judges. Seeing his wife's killer walk free makes Kyle's blood boil. Suddenly, he snatches a gun from a nearby police officer and shoots Sergio in front of everyone, killing him in the courtroom itself. As a result, Kyle is sentenced to life imprisonment for murder and is sent permanently to prison. Soon, Kyle and other inmates are transported far away to Kravavi prison. There, we meet the prison superintendent, Harsh. Shortly after, a wounded American prisoner is brought before the inmates, and Kyle realizes that American prisoners are treated terribly here. Afterward, Kyle and the other prisoners are taken for medical inspection, where a prison guard named Taka confiscates all of Kyle's valuables. Suddenly, Taka notices Kyle's wedding ring and demands it. When Kyle refuses, Taka brutally beats him and forcibly removes the ring from his hand. Kyle then picks up Gray's photograph from the floor and keeps it with him. Watching all this, a nearby prisoner becomes frightened. His name is Billy, a 21-year-old who has been sentenced to 2 years in prison for a car accident case. Soon, all prisoners receive prison clothes and are sent to their cells. The next day, we meet a prisoner named Andrei, a powerful fighter from the Russian mafia group who leads a Russian fighting gang inside the prison. In reality, Kravavi prison hosts weekly fights called Sparka, where Superintendent Harsh and generals from other prisons place bets and earn huge amounts of money. Andrei is considered the strongest fighter because he has never lost a fight, which has made him extremely arrogant. When Kyle sees the prison atmosphere, he tries to stay away from all this. Days pass quickly, and one morning, while walking near the cells, Kyle sees Billy being brutally beaten by none other than Andrei. Kyle wants no involvement, so he quietly tries to leave, but Andrei blocks his path and behaves exactly the way Sergio behaved toward Kyle in court. Remembering Sergio enrages Kyle. As soon as Andrei approaches him, Kyle attacks him, and a fight breaks out. Soon Taka arrives, restrains Kyle, and as punishment throws him into a dark, solitary confinement cell. Kyle spends many days in the darkness and begins a hunger strike, but still isn't released. Every night, Gray appears in his dreams. Thinking about her death breaks Kyle's spirit, and he decides to end his life. He tries hanging himself with his shirt, but fails. Then he smashes his head against the wall, severely injuring himself, but still survives. At that moment, a small butterfly enters through the ceiling and lands on the food near him. Seeing the butterfly reminds Kyle of Gray's promise that she would always stay with him. This gives him strength, and he finally eats the food. A few days later, Taka removes Kyle from solitary and places him in the cell of another dangerous prisoner known only as 451, who has already killed 5 cellmates. Kyle is terrified and quietly arranges his belongings. Soon he notices that 451 spends his time reading books, and his cell is filled with them. The next day, Kyle meets a disabled inmate named Malachi, who tells him that if he wants to get out of 451's cell, He'll have to bribe Taka, otherwise 451 may kill him any time. That same night, Kyle has a terrible nightmare and screams in his sleep. 451 suddenly covers Kyle's mouth and nearly suffocates him, terrifying Kyle even more. The next day, Kyle offers Taka money to move him to another cell, but Taka refuses and demands even more money. A few days later, Kyle is taken outside for mining work. While working, a Russian prisoner starts insulting him. Guards arrive, and the Russian falsely claims that Kyle insulted him. The guards then allow the prisoners to take revenge. Immediately, several Russian inmates gang up and beat Kyle. When Kyle fights back in self-defense, the guards punish him again by locking him in solitary confinement. This time, however, Kyle doesn't go on hunger strike. While eating, he hears someone crying behind the wall. He pounds on the wall loudly, and the crying stops. Days pass, and every day Kyle hears the sounds of Sparka fights outside. Eventually, Kyle is released from solitary. While leaving, he notices guards carrying huge amounts of food somewhere. After returning, Kyle becomes completely silent. One day, Andre challenges him to a Sparka fight, but Kyle says nothing. That night, back in 451's cell, Kyle finds 451's diary and starts reading it. When 451 enters, Kyle no longer fears him and calmly puts the diary aside. The next day during lunch, Andre again provokes Kyle. Suddenly, Kyle stands up and attacks Andre before he can react, starting another fight. 451 watches everything. Soon Andre's gang joins in and brutally beats Kyle until Taka and the guards arrive and drag Kyle back into solitary confinement. Kyle breaks emotionally. The next day, Billy and the others are taken again for mining work when suddenly an explosion occurs. Taking advantage of the chaos, Billy and another inmate escape. Guards quickly spot them and open fire. Billy's companion is killed, but Billy keeps running through fields until helicopters and more guards capture him. Meanwhile, in solitary confinement, Kyle completely transforms himself. Inspired by 451's diary, which said that hatred gives a man more strength than hope ever could, Kyle begins intense physical training day and night. Eventually, Kyle escapes through the ceiling of the cell and trains himself to endure anything. Even the weather no longer affects him. Taka realizes Kyle is finally ready for Sparka. Soon, the Sparka fights begin again, and for the first time, Kyle faces Andre. Billy supports him from the sidelines, while Harsh and the generals place bets on Andre's victory. The fight begins, and Andre dominates at first because of his experience. He brutally beats Kyle while Billy encourages him not to give up. Suddenly, Kyle injures Andre, enraging him further. But Kyle finally uses a deadly move and strikes Andre's neck so violently that Andre dies on the spot. After Andre's death, Kyle changes completely. All the prisoners become afraid of him. That night, 451 speaks to Kyle for the first time and tells him that he has finally chosen the path of hatred. From then on, Kyle wins every Sparka fight and takes Andre's place. Harsh earns huge profits betting on him, and prisoners begin respecting him. But Billy and Malachi become disturbed because Kyle has become so ruthless that he kills defeated opponents whenever Taka orders him to. Soon, Kyle cuts his hair and beard, transforming himself into a gangster-like figure, and tells 451 that he has learned how to survive here. Later, during a prison singing party, Billy plans another escape. Malachi helps him by giving him a key to the lockup. Kyle initially tries to stop Billy, but Billy convinces him otherwise. Kyle gives him money and wishes him luck. At that moment, a prisoner named Rocky introduces himself to Kyle. Hatred is clearly visible in Rocky's eyes. After Rocky leaves, 451 tells Kyle that Rocky has been transferred from another prison specifically to fight him. During an independence ceremony that night, Billy uses the distraction to escape and retrieve a hidden weapon, but guards catch him before he can use it. Billy is brought before Taka, who brutally beats him and forces him to obey every order or face a painful death. Later, we discover that Malachi betrayed Billy in exchange for medicine from Taka. 451 overhears everything and realizes Malachi caused Billy's capture. Soon, Rocky begins participating in Sparka fights, displaying such brutality that no inmate can stand against him. A few days later, Taka learns that Billy is badly injured in his cell. He rushes there with guards. Billy is dying. Kyle arrives and is devastated seeing Billy's condition. Billy reveals that Rocky did this to him and makes one final request. Kyle must stop fighting because the prison generals and guards are turning him into an animal for profit. After saying this, Billy dies. Billy's body is dumped into a pit inside the prison. Soon, Kyle and Rocky face each other in Sparka. Harsh bets on Kyle again, while the others support Rocky. As the fight starts, Rocky taunts Kyle to kill him, but Kyle suddenly sits down and refuses to fight. Everyone is shocked. Rocky attacks relentlessly, but Kyle silently takes the beating without responding. Furious, Harsh orders Taka through a walkie-talkie to remove Kyle before he loses his bets. That night, Kyle is tied up in the fighting arena as punishment, so the other prisoners can learn a lesson. Taka tells him he won't be released until he agrees to fight again. 3 days pass. Kyle remains tied up without food or water. Seeing this increases the prisoner's respect for him. One night, 451 confronts Malachi and punishes him for betraying Billy by burning him alive. As days pass, Kyle's condition worsens, but he refuses to break. Inspired by his courage, the Russian and American fighting groups decide to unite. On the next Sparka Day, none of the fighters agree to participate. Taka becomes furious, but controlling so many prisoners is impossible. Harsh temporarily suspends the fights. The next day, Taka asks permission to kill Kyle, but Harsh refuses, explaining that killing Kyle would turn him into a hero among the inmates. Kyle is later moved to the medical room and then back to solitary confinement, where he again hears crying behind the walls. One stormy night, Taka drags Kyle out. Harsh gathers all prisoners and announces they are about to witness the punishment for breaking prison rules. Soon, an extremely dangerous prisoner named Milosh is brought in under heavy security. He is monstrously powerful. Milosh breaks free and charges at Kyle. Terrified, Kyle tries to run, but Milosh catches him and smashes him against a wall. As Milosh begins choking Kyle, Kyle repeatedly pounds on the wall. Milosh suddenly stops and responds with the same tapping pattern. Both realize they recognize each other's signals. Milosh reveals that Kyle was the friend who used to communicate with him through the solitary confinement walls. Everyone is shocked. Taka immediately points a gun at them and orders them to fight. Kyle tells Taka to shoot him instead. At that moment, all the prisoners begin shouting for Kyle's release. Harsh orders Taka to kill Kyle, but Milosh shields him and takes the bullets himself. Even while wounded, Milosh fights alongside Kyle against the guards. The prisoners riot, break the gates, and chaos erupts throughout the prison. Milosh dies in Kyle's arms after Kyle promises to avenge him. Kyle then frees 451 from his cell. The prison descends into total chaos as inmates set it on fire and attempt to escape. Guards open fire from the towers, killing many prisoners, and reinforcements arrive to regain control. Kyle and 451 retreat inside, where Kyle finally tells 45. Won his entire story and admits he wants to escape because he cannot spend his life consumed by hatred. 451 tells him he can help. Back in their cell, 451 reveals secret documents hidden in the wall, records of all prisoners who died in the prison over the last 20 years. He makes Kyle promise to expose the truth to the world. Kyle agrees. 451 then explains that Kyle must fight one final battle to earn freedom. Although Kyle initially refuses, he finally agrees. The next morning, the dead bodies are collected, and all prisoners are locked in their cells for 2 weeks. Soon, Harsh arranges one final fight between Kyle and Rocky before killing Kyle. The fight begins. Rocky is stronger, but Kyle fights with determination. Meanwhile, 451 secretly receives a signal that a plan has been completed and quietly slips away. Eventually, Kyle gains control over Rocky and breaks his arm. Rocky suddenly pulls a knife from his shoe, but accidentally stabs another gang leader instead, killing him. Taka and the guards rush in. In the chaos, Kyle smashes Rocky's head into a steel rod, killing him and finally avenging Billy. Taka handcuffs Kyle and takes him toward the garage, intending to execute him in the fields. But suddenly 451 appears, and together they overpower the guards. Kyle forces Taka to unlock his handcuffs. He retrieves his wedding ring from Taka, stuffs cloth into his mouth, and crushes him beneath a nearby jeep. 451 then brings guard uniforms and gives Kyle a general's car so he can escape. Kyle asks 451 to come with him, but 451 says he still has unfinished business inside the prison and reminds Kyle to fulfill his promise. The two share a final goodbye. Kyle drives through the prison and reaches the gate, where guards let him pass without checking. After enduring unimaginable suffering and transforming himself completely, Kyle finally escapes far away from the prison. Meanwhile, 451 enters General Harsh's room and kills him. When guards arrive, they find 451 calmly drinking wine. They arrest him. After gaining freedom, Kyle hands all the evidence over to security agencies. 3 months later, Travi Prison is permanently shut down,